All right, Lusketeers, we are back and we have a monster of an episode today.
It's a monster. It's a beautiful monster.
It's like a big, wonderful monster who's giving you a hug and then saying awesome things to you.
And roaring.
Like a lion.
Yes.
Our friends Louie and Shelley Giglio are on the conversation today. Shelley's never been on our podcast before. Not that we haven't tried.
We haven't.
We've tried multiple times.
Yes.
We had Louie back on in the 50s when we were just 54 or so, 52 or so.
Episode
along. 52. And now here we are, all grown up, episode 124, if you can believe it.
Wow.
And we got Shelley and Louie both. There was a lot of rescheduling for this, so I'm glad this happened.
Yeah.
And they are busy people, so it's incredible they took some time.
We're asking them a lot of different questions, and they actually tried to ask us some questions. But
Sneaky Louie, always trying to sneak his way in.
They are special people in our lives and our hearts and our family. They pour into us, and to be able to share a little glimpse of who they are and their relationship, our relationship with them, with you today is really a gift to us.
You're going to want to stay to the end, as always. Hey, we see you who start but don't finish these podcast episodes. Like I just winked creepily at the camera. Jennie always warns me, if I don't stop winking, I'm going to start winking involuntarily.
But it's a creepy wink. It's not a normal wink. It's like your whole eye like
Jennie,
cringes.
I like to call it a crinking. It's a funny little thing we do. If I need to make Jennie laugh, I just start. Well, it's not really a wink. It's more like I just make my left eye shake a little bit. So she's always warning me to stop it.
But sadly, that's the eye you're having struggles with.
Wow, just throwing me under the bus right in front of my friends. Jeez, I try and get you nice things. I say nice words to you. I buy you flowers here and there. And this is how you treat me. I never buy you flowers. You don't even care about flowers.
I love flowers.
All right, that's it. I'm buying flowers. Today's the day. I'm going to go do it right after my optometrist appointment, which I got to go to. Thanks for bringing it up.
Hey, I love you. Creepy wink and all.
Are you going to love me when I'm 64?
Yes.
Okay, good. But at the end of the conversation, for those of you who like Europe,
or if you don't like Europe,
well, maybe you'll need to.
Yeah.
Maybe you're planning a trip to London. These two people know London, England, like you wouldn't believe. It's a side thing for them. With some other people might like London, with them it's love. And they give some tidbits if you are planning a trip to London about what to think about and do.
Yeah.
So stay tuned to the end of the conversation for the skinny on London.
Yeah.
All right. Enjoy this conversation with Louie and Shelley Giglio. Well, I have to say, Louie Giglio, welcome back to It's Lusko and Shelley Giglio. First time
this is
ever.
I feel very,
it's very.
Be
a step up.
I feel so valued. Thank you so much, Luskos, for having me.
Oh my goodness,
it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, two of our favorite people on the planet,
yes.
And we just every second with you is a joy. We tried to do this multiple times. Louie, you were on episode 52, which was 72 episodes.
Man, you guys are cranking them out.
Wow.
Lusko's amazing.
Congratulations, guys.
That's incredible.
That's wow.
I know. Very impressive. I move at a slow speed, apparently.
So I'm in the archives.
124, but it's just getting
Louie's
better.
in the archives.
Yeah. But our last conversation was awesome. You had just released Not Forsaken. We talked, Louie, a lot about your father. We talked about fatherhood in general, being dads. You shared so much. We talked about the family tree and in God's family, the sap flowing both directions. And kind of the, I don't want to say irony or in any way not acknowledge that the Holy Spirit's working in all of this. But last time we tried to have this conversation with the two of you, you guys literally sat down to do our conversation and the phone rang, Shelley, with some really hard news about your father.
Yeah, that's, I was walking down today just thinking about that moment, and we were all set to talk to you guys, which was perfect. Honestly, I think God aligned that moment too, so that it wasn't just anyone on the other side of the screen, but it was you guys. But yeah, my brother called just to say that my dad had just gone to heaven. And wow, that was a moment. Even if you anticipate that that's coming, as we have with my dad for some time, just because of his illness with cancer for such a long period of time, but you're never prepared to receive that call. It does not matter how much you've thought about it and prayed about it and asked God to help you. You're not prepared. So anyway, hard days, but we are getting through them with the help of the Holy Spirit, who is good to comfort and guide us and help us. And you guys know more about that than most people do. But it's been a good season of just leaning on the Lord.
Wow.
Well, we're so sorry for what you've walked through, but so grateful for how you shine so bright and how you walk through the difficulty with, just such a realness and such a grace and such a perspective of who God is. And we just love you.
Love you guys. Loss is just a part of life.
Shelley,
you got to learn how to.
I was just gonna say, I don't want to, speak out of school at all, but I know that this was a long buildup. This fight was long. I mean, every time we would be together, you'd be either coming and going from Houston and traveling back and forth. I was just curious, as much as you're willing to talk about maybe some of the grief you did ahead of time versus the grief now. I know that there can be kind of like a pre-grief and then it hits you in waves. Like you said, you're never ready, but what has surprised you about this grieving in this way?
I think, you mentioned it was a long journey. 9 years of cancer diagnosis. He had multiple myeloma, which is a very, very serious cancer of the blood. And so, there isn't a cure for it. And really the only time I saw my dad cry in the whole journey of having cancer, and Louie will remember this, I was talking to him on the phone one day when he'd just been to MD Anderson, which he was under the best care in the world, taking care of him. And he had just been there for an appointment. And I called him in the car just to see kind of what the news was. I didn't think it was going to be super great. So I was kind of preparing myself, and I called him and he answered the phone. And in the car with my mom, they were in the car together, and they all talk over each other the whole time. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out what's going on. I'm kind of sensing it wasn't great. And I felt like my dad was maybe tearing up a little bit. So I was like, Dad, what's happening? What did they tell you? I'm just assuming it's going to be bad news. And he was crying because the doctor had just said that he was really close to a cure for multiple myeloma. And he was one of the number 1 or number 2 doctors for myeloma in the world. And that they're really scientists and they're on a mission to try to help cure this cancer. And my dad was crying because he was thinking about the fact that maybe no one else would have to endure what he's walked through. And of all the things my dad had been through, stem cell transplants, near-death experiences over and over, the only thing that he cried about was the possibility that no one else would have to endure it. And I just think that speaks volumes about my dad's person, that's the thing that would make him emotional. And I want to be like that. I really do. I want to be the kind of person that is way more concerned about what other people have to go through than I am concerned about how I'm going to endure it. And that was my dad. He was always others focused. He cared about people. Mm-hmm. He really wanted people to live their best life. And if he could be a part of even the science of helping figure out a cure so that somebody else might not have to endure something, then he was all game for that. So it's pretty sweet to think about. Pretty amazing. Wow. And I would just say for the grief side of things, we started a long time ago thinking that my dad might not make it and that eventually he would die, maybe not of this, but of something. So I do think you prepare yourself for that gap, that loss of knowing he's not just with us right now, not that he's gone forever, but that he's not with us right now. And you guys talk about this so well. I think Levi or Jennie, one of you both say, maybe both of you say that the days are getting nearer where you'll be back with Linya, and that every day that passes, you're not further from her, you're closer to her. And so I think heaven is just a temporary situation where there's a division between us here and what we're going through and them in the glory of God, being in the presence of God, worshiping the God that made them, that they've longed for this moment. And so we're moving closer day by day. So I've been thinking about all those things for a long time in life. But again, you can't prepare yourself for the moment that there's the gap, and you will fill the gap. And I think for humans, we have to know, we're made of dust. I think Lent is all about that situation of understanding, hey, we are dust. And there's nothing to be proud about here. We're just dust kind of held together by the grace of God. And for such a time as this, and for purpose and meaning that God has intended for our lives. But that won't last forever, and eventually we'll be reunited with our Creator. And that's what we're really looking forward to. And I think for me, the gap of missing my dad is big in these days. But the bigger thing that infiltrates my mind and heart every day is that my dad is where I'm going, and that I will be reunited, but really around the throne room of Jesus, which is what he lived for, and it's what I live for. So it's going to be a glorious reunion, and Jesus is going to be praised, and that's pretty awesome to think about.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for sharing all that. Wow.
Yeah, that's profound.
Beautiful.
And I think, until you go through a significant grief, until you face it, you can't really expect and anticipate just even the physical sense of it, and just the toll it is psychologically. And yet if the Beatitudes are true, then you can also expect God to come near in some way, for there to be a comfort in some way. And so in some way, it sounds so weird to say it and would be insensitive if you hadn't gone through it, but to say, oh, no, we're the lucky ones. We who are grieving, there's a sense in which God's just come near and fills those gaps in with his presence, right?
Yeah, I remember watching Louie walk through the loss of his dad and mom, and just the length of grief is so surprising. I think you kind of think, well, obviously I'm going to be sad, but that won't last very long. But it lasts a long time in so many ways. And things come up that remind you, and things trigger you that you haven't thought about in a long time that you have to walk through. And so I think you just have to you have to give grace to yourself for this season, and have to give yourself margin to understand that when these things come up emotionally, that you just need to stop and deal the best way you can in the moment with what you're dealing with, and not expect yourself to be better and kind of put pressure on yourself that this should be done, and I should be back to normal. I don't expect that I'll really ever be normal. And I wouldn't think any of us are who've walked through grief. It'll get better, but it will never be normal. So that's the kind of grace we need to extend, not just to other people, but to ourselves.
Yeah, it really is freeing to remember that Jesus in heaven is still going to have the wounds, so it's not like God wants to take those away. Like we keep them, we keep the wounds. But in fact, I think if we had the option, would want them to go away, because that's almost in some way a proof of love, a badge of what God has brought you through. I think it's going to bring God glory forever. Jesus could get rid of those wounds, but he hangs on to them because they're proof of his love for us, right? Wow. Whew. Well, everything I know about your dad, Shelley, I remember the first time we did an event in Houston and we were driving by, you're like, that's where my dad lives. Like, it was just, and I feel like for me as a dad to 4 girls, like there's such, I just see you as a grown woman with such love and appreciation. And Louie, for you, the way you always spoke with such honor about your father-in-law, and that you got to preach at his funeral, right?
Yeah, I did. I had the real privilege of having a man like Shelley's dad in my life, and I talked a little bit about it at his celebration of life service. And I've talked a lot about it on and on. You mentioned Not Forsaken, which is weird. You talked about kind of the way God organizes everything, but we're re-releasing that book in a couple of months under its original title, which is Seeing God as a Perfect Father. And I was just reading, because it's updated, revised, and I was reading the audiobook right here a few days ago, and I was reading the dedication, which I had to change from present tense about Shelley's dad to past tense. And then I had to go into the manuscript as I was editing different things and change things about her dad from present tense to past tense. And it was so surreal. But just reading the dedication to my dad and then to Shelley's dad, and just I sang when he was alive so he could read it in that dedication, which I'm so glad he did, that he just would never really know how much of an impact he had on me from just watching his life. And Shelley talked about this when her dad went to heaven, but he wasn't the kind that would say, hey, let me teach you some things, or hey, let's grab coffee and let me tell you a few things about life. He would help you if it was solicited. But he wasn't the kind to go around and give unsolicited advice, and he didn't really give a lot of advice. He just showed you a lot of advice. And he was completely opposite of my dad. You know, I got this graphic designer, golf playing, you know, guy's got 75 empty coffee cups in the back of his car, going to work. And then I got Shelley's dad over here, whose car doesn't even have a piece of lint in it anywhere. And he's got on a Brooks Brothers suit, and he's, you know, at work at 6:15 in the morning, and just totally two different people. And man, how lucky, fortunate, blessed, I think, to be somebody who has that dad and that father-in-law. What a gift from God. And yeah,
and that explains a lot about who you are, Louie, right?
Yeah.
What you just said,
Yeah.
right? The creative,
The coffee cups. Was it the coffee cups?
mad scientist, but cleanliness, you know, like both of them together.
Right. Totally.
What a perfect concoction God.
Shelley's family did not have a off switch. And so, you know, my family, we would go to church on Sunday morning. If our whole family went back in the day, come home, you eat lunch, and then you take a nap. That's just the deal. Then you wake up, go to youth choir, Sunday night church, whatever. Man, at Shelley's house, we'd come home from church when I was in Houston when we were dating, and it'd be like, okay, just had lunch. Now let's wash and vacuum all the cars. Now let's pressure wash the house. Now let's do whatever. And there was just so,
I don't know. That also explains a lot, right?
It was a real shock to the system. But I've got this. Shelley's taken one nap, maybe two naps since we've been married. So she's migrating
I'm working my way up, guys.
She's migrating.
I'm about to be a napper soon.
That is so funny. Now, what was that like, Louie, asking for her hand in marriage? Like, I've heard the story of you making the cellophane poster to hang outside her dorm window when you originally kind of like asked her out or wanted to show her your love early on. But what about when you asked Shelley's dad for that? Like, what did that look like?
Well, you know, by then we were golden. I think the thing I talked about at his celebration of life is that when I went to Houston to be a summer college intern in 1983, I went to Shelley's church. So that's how we met. I went to be the summer college intern at the church where Shelley was a college student.
Ooh,
so
that's verboten, right?
Yeah. Doesn't look good.
Sorry.
And I was 6 years older. Apparently the summer before me, there'd been an intern that had kind of maybe, you know, blurred some of the lines a little bit. So we were all forbidden to date anyone in our age group or in the church. And the pastor made that super clear. There were about 20 of us interns at this meeting. And he said, but I don't want to, you know, get in the way of the Holy Spirit. So if God moves, come and talk to me. And I joked with the person who'd gotten me into this role a few weeks before. I just leaned over to her, a friend of mine from seminary, and I said, oh, I'm sure I'll be down in his office in a couple of weeks. And just laughed. The last thing I wanted to do was to find someone and get in a relationship at this particular point in life. Well, about 2.5 weeks later, I'm sitting in the pastor's office. And I am, you know, Shelley had dated one of his sons, and so news travels. So he already knew.
Oh, goodness.
So I walk in, sit down. I had to throw that in. And
yeah, he always throws things like
shots
that.
fired.
Yeah, shots fired.
And a couple of other guys in the college
Whatever.
ministry. So that
We
was a
don't need to
very
cover my
awkward kind
dating
of thing
life.
for the whole summer.
Anyway.
But he says, well, I hear that you are interested in Shelley Graves. And I said, yes, sir, I am. I didn't see it coming. He goes, I'm telling you, she's an amazing girl. You know, just be careful and be respectful and don't make waves. And I was like, great. So I think I have your blessing to like make sure that she's the last person of all the kids I'm visiting on a certain weeknight. I'm going to end up at her house last.
I'm sure that's what he was thinking.
Yeah, I'm
for
sure.
some quality time.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, her dad got wind of this, that this 25-year-old seminary guy was in town and had some funky clothes on that were not Brooks Brothers, and it looked like I got him at the merry-go-round at the mall. If anybody's my age and can remember that reference, somebody's laughing somewhere right now. You're welcome.
The South Coast Plaza still has a merry-go-round in it. In Orange
No, it
County, by the
doesn't.
way.
Is that even possible?
It does.
You
Next
are
to
kidding
Uniqlo.
me.
There's a
I
merry-go-round.
need to go by and just see what's
in
current.
South Coast Plaza, I'm
Wait,
telling you.
Well, I was
Actual
rocking some
merry-go-round.
suit that looked like it was my attempt to be like on the Italian Riviera or something, and it just was all wrong for Houston, Texas, and for Shelley's dad.
Yeah.
But her dad got wind of this thing that, hey, there's a relationship brewing here, and my daughter's interested in this guy, and he just put the quietus on that, like straight out, told Shelley, no way, you are not dating this guy. This is not happening. This is over. And so that was the reality. And so we were off. I mean, we were on, and then real quick we were off. And so that's kind of that was the tricky part of our relationship. But Shelley got in there and sort of worked her dad over somehow. I don't know exactly how. And he relented after a few weeks. And
what did that look like, Shelley? How did you win him over?
You know, I had him won over from the time I was born, basically. So I just went in like, your daughters do you, Levi. And I just said to my dad, I think this time you've gotten it wrong. And if you'll give me a little bit of margin, I'll prove it to you. And I think you're going to love this guy more than you ever could fathom. And he said, I believe that I can trust you. And I want to give you the margin to do what you think is right. And I'll relent and let you guys see each other. And then we'll just keep praying that God will lead us all in the same direction. And he did. And so sometimes it takes courage, just to say, I know this is the right thing. And I was young, but I knew. And once you know. And, it was just a matter of time. And Louie was so respectful of my dad's boundaries and of saying, I will never marry your daughter before she's done with school, because I know that's important to you that she finish, and all these things that my dad kind of had as ideas for me. Louie respected. And I think so many times when that's when people cross the line of disrespect, because it's like, we did know that we were going to get married, but Louie also took the time that was necessary for other people to come into the equation in healthy ways so that we could all be together celebrating that this was happening and this was what God was doing. Not that we just went and did it and then hoped everybody else would get on board. So I think that's part of the way that we convinced my family that we were a good idea.
Yeah, then we dated for 3 years, so everybody was on board fully by then. Shelley graduated, as I promised her dad. He thought I was going to take her daughter off, and when I finished grad school, that we were just going to take off
I
somewhere.
guess, I'm not sure. Yeah.
She got her business degree from Baylor. The end of that summer, we got married, and everybody had sort of come around to the idea that this is what God was doing by then. But when I asked her dad if I could marry her, it was very simple at that point. And obviously he and her mom were big fans of that idea, but God bless him. He was an amazing guy and just easy to celebrate. I shared this story, Levi, at his service, but just such a hard journey for him because, I came from this lower middle class family, and, I think got a new car twice in my lifetime, but mostly we would get used cars, and our new cars would be used cars. And, we got married. I had this car that I'd had that I thought was pretty amazing that I got as a used car. It was my first car I ever had in Atlanta, drove it to Texas. And finally we got married, and somehow I traded that thing in on a brand new Volkswagen Fox. Now, that doesn't mean a lot to most people, so you have to Google that.
It will mean a lot when you Google it.
Not a Golf, a Fox, a Volkswagen Fox. And it was bright red. Thing looked like a Matchbox car. I mean, it had no business being on a freeway. And we were driving to our family's ranch in Texas this weekend, where her parents have a house. And I was so excited. I'm like, we're taking the Fox. I can't wait to show your dad my brand new car, because he was really into cars.
Oh, I'm looking at it now. That's 2 doors. That is a little hatchback. Wow.
It is tiny.
It's like a tiny egg.
It is literally tiny.
It's so cute.
I have never seen one.
We come driving down the drive, and this would have been 1984, 1987 or 8, probably.
7 or 8.
And maybe 89. And we come driving down the drive, and we park, and her dad walks out to the front of their property, and I can just see him inside going, what are you thinking driving my daughter in that car? But on the outside, he's like, oh, I love your car. And he gets in it, and he's touching everything, and he's asking all these questions, and he's so excited that I got this new car. And I was so dumb that I didn't get it until later. And I realized, oh my goodness, you were dying on the inside because of this car. And he just made me feel great, made me feel proud. And That's a real gift.
on.
He also then a little bit later tried to give me his BMW 6 Series.
He's like, you need a bigger car.
Yeah.
He was getting a new car, and he said, Louie, I've decided, the Lord's laid it on my heart to give you my car.
Oh my
Meaning,
God.
get rid of the Volkswagen Fox, because you're going to be driving my daughter in this car.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Right.
Your
I
upgrade has
do
come
disciple nows for a living at small churches around Texas. I don't think I'm going to be able to be pulling up in my BMW 6 Series. So I'm going to have to say no to the car and go home in the Fox. But I appreciate the sentiment in your heart.
Oh my
What a good man.
gosh.
And well played on his part, by the way. Yeah.
So Shelley, you are his only daughter, right?
Yes.
You have a brother, and then
have an
just you.
older
So that
brother.
makes sense.
He
Yeah.
was a lot of fun
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay, he's amazing. Can't wait to see him in heaven. And I do think the tenses is important. I think, it is hard to talk about someone in the past tense because you also know that's dishonest because we know they're more alive than they ever are, right? So I think it is okay to put an asterisk on a past tense. We can talk about their life on earth that way, but always keeping in our heart that asterisk that they are still alive and more alive. And in our future, they're in the past tense, but also future tense, right? So that's the tension we live in here now.
It's good, babe. Yeah.
Levi, we were talking the other day, and a friend of ours was talking about Linya and saying when she passed, and then you interrupted and said, I don't really like that word passed. Talk about that just for a second.
I'll do the driving here, Louie. No, I'm just...
I told you it wasn't going to happen that
This
way.
isn't
Levi.
passion and
right?
purpose.
I know,
I'm not.
right?
I have a lot of questions.
Tried to warn you.
You can't wind me up.
I have a blank paper, so I'm here to take off.
Jennie's here for the ride. I do think that's important. I don't know. I object to normal language about it. Rest in peace. Anything that kind of is theologically inaccurate, right? They're not just in the ether. They're with Jesus in glory. Today we will be with him in paradise. So I think it's just important we hold that. I'm not hard and fast on it or legalistic, but I do think language matters because words, as it has been said, create worlds. And if Christ is at the right hand of the Father with your dad and with our daughter, then that's true. And so let's hang ourselves on the truth. But because this is our podcast and we have the questions to ask, I do want to real quickly, you mentioned Not Forsaken, which has now been re-released, and you've got the audiobook out. Today, as we're recording this, people are listening to this in June, but today is the release day for the Indescribable kids activity book. Louie, tell us a little bit about that.
Wow. I wish I had one in my hands right now, but we're so pumped about this. Levi, I did this message a while back called Indescribable and then a companion message called How Great Is Our God. And they really resonated with people. And from that moment on, I've just seen this amazing power of the merging of God and science.
Yeah.
And I think have sometimes felt like we had to live in separate camps and build a big wall between us, between the scientists and those of us who follow Jesus. But God created all the scientists and he created everything that we study in science. And so why would we be afraid of science? Yes, there are some scientists that are, I think, anti our faith, but why should we be afraid of that? If we know that God did, in fact, create everything that there is. And so we kept trying to figure out how can we keep this fire burning, especially for kids. And so we've done 3 kids devotionals: Indescribable, How Great Is Our God, The Wonder of Creation. Each of them 100 devotions about God and science for 6 to 11-year-olds. And they have really resonated. Again, not a surprise. And so today our team is releasing this activity book. It's 200 pages of tidbits about science connected to truths about God, and then connected to crossword puzzles, word finds, science experiments, and all kinds of fun stuff for kids to get into. And I'm pumped. We have such a great Indescribable Kids team. They help create these amazing resources. Trust me, I haven't researched every single devotion personally and written it. We have an amazing team around the Indescribable Kids lane. And so today, this activity book is out everywhere. If you're looking for a way to occupy a couple days of your 6 to 11-year-olds' time and inspire them at the same time, I highly recommend that you find it.
Well, let me just say to the Lusketeers listening, the average age of our podcast listener is 35, split exactly in the middle, male and female, and so many of them are parents. And so if, like us, you're looking for stuff for your Lennox or your Clover, who at the car trip, the thing, I mean, our kids treat this stuff like it's candy. They can't get
true.
their hands on it fast enough. So I'm actually a little mad. The UPS guy has not brought our copy yet, but I'm gonna have to just go and get down to Barnes & Noble and get one.
Hey, the wagon train runs a little slower up in Montana.
It's true. Dirt roads.
And
They're
that's the
still
best
trying to
thing
get it to
about
you.
where we live. That is really true.
Funny.
But get a copy of this Indescribable Kids Activity Book. It's fantastic.
But I don't know if I've mentioned this the last time you were on, Louie, but in our family, we homeschool, and your Indescribable and How Great Is Our God have been such resources for our kids as we're either starting the day, and then we learn about a certain whale, and then we go on YouTube and we're looking at what this whale can do. Like, it literally has brought so much conversation and wonder and awe in our family. And so the Luskos, thank you for those resources.
I love it.
They're amazing.
And I was looking today, just Kids on Release Day. I think it's fair enough to say that an author will check, Amazon or this or that to see kind of how are things doing.
Right.
And I was looking in the kids devotional section, Christian kids devotions on Amazon today, just seeing like, are people finding it? And there it was, right next to Levi Lusko, Devotion for Kids. They were side by side.
Oh, I love it. Roar like a lion.
I just hope the
how cool.
algorithm tricks people into thinking that when they come from, that's
That they're
no,
connected and related.
They're
That's
best
the
friends there.
Best cover ever for kids devotional. I think, in my opinion, congrats. If people obviously know about your book, but if they don't, it's not only an amazing book and a resource, but it's also super cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Agree.
It adds to the confusion. Remember that guy who came up to you and was like,
yeah.
"Are you Levi?
No, he
Giglio?"
said, "Are you Louie?"
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
I said, "Nope, my name's Levi." He's like, "Giglio?" I was like, "That's still Louie. That's you still are still Louie." But
Hey.
I'm happy to be confused for you any day.
I know.
Hair's going to need to be a
I
little
wanted
wider.
to ask.
But
We were talking about college a moment ago. Of course, the world, knows you guys through many things: the books and the church, of course. Most recently, Shelley, the Grove Conference, which we do want to get to that in just a second. I know Jennie came back, her and Livy both came back glowing like Moses from Mount Sinai from the time at Grove Conference. So I want to talk about that in a minute. But when it comes to college, you talked about your promise to Shelley's dad, Louie, that she would finish college. We're at that age, like a lot of people are, where Olivia is 17, getting close to college. She's starting to think and pray about it. She's starting to get to where everybody who talks to her, that's the only thing they want to talk about, rounding out her junior year. And she really is not quite exactly positive. She's got a couple thoughts. But, as you guys have a unique perspective because of the Passion Conferences, and you guys have been a spiritual, mother and father to a whole generation of college students for a very long time. Yeah. What sort of factors would you, speaking to a 17, 18-year-old, when making a choice between community college and a private college and state school and all of the different things out there, what factors go into your advice when you speak to a young college student, almost about to be?
It's good.
Well, I think for me, talking to Olivia, if I was talking to her and she asked me and said, "What do you think about college?" I probably would take a deep breath and say, I think you should really lean into your mom and dad and kind of what they're feeling and what they're seeing for your life, because that's the role of parents, is really to help steer their kids towards God's best for them in their life.
Yeah.
And but she said, "Well, what do you think?" I would say, "Well, I think you should take the best step to get equipped to do what you feel best about doing with your life right now."
Good.
And I know for me, early on in college, I knew God was calling me to preach. And I knew, Levi and Jennie, the thing I had to do really was go to seminary. I didn't have to, but that was the lane I was going to choose. I could have gone and mentored with someone or maybe gone to a discipleship program somewhere, but I wanted to learn Greek. I wanted to learn Hebrew. I wanted to learn systematic theology. I wanted the rebar, that goes down and allows the building to be strong. And so I knew that was where I was headed. And so college for me, honestly, was a stepping stone to getting where I wanted to go. And so it was an important necessity to get a master's degree. You have to have a bachelor's degree. So I went to Georgia State University. I studied speech communication. I got a bachelor's degree so that I could then go on to seminary. But the goal in all that wasn't school. The goal in all that was equipping and preparation for my best understanding of what God wanted to do in my life. And so I don't think every 17 and 18-year-old needs to go to college to get the best preparation and equipping for what God has called them to do in life, but a lot do. And so I would look at it maybe from that angle. And then I think secondarily to me is that college is great in teaching you information, but not many people honestly are out doing what they're doing based on the information that they learned in college.
True.
It's more about the formation. It's learning to live on your own. It's learning to live without adult supervision. It's learning to find yourself and find your faith. You know, all of a sudden I'm struggling now. Is this my parents' faith or is this my faith? And that battle is so important for every 18, 19, 20-year-old. And then I think it's coming out on the other side and learning how to be responsible. So a lot of college is information, but a lot of it is formation.
Wow.
And I think it's all, you know, it's expensive. And if you can't afford it, that's a whole nother question. I don't really believe you need to go into a mountain of debt just so that you can get a college degree. So if you can't afford to go to college, then maybe you have to work out an alternate plan or take a little bit longer. But I think it's almost worth it just for the formation of it. But I would ask again, what's your best understanding of what God wants you to do with your life? Okay, then what are the best ways you can get equipped and prepared for what God is calling you to do? And that might be college and it might not.
Whew, what a great
Great
answer.
wisdom.
That's really
Great
profound.
wisdom.
Thank you. Selfish of us. It was on my list because of that. Shelley, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I thought he covered
She
it
wants
well.
Olivia to go to Baylor.
I think she should definitely go to Baylor.
The Texas cries are coming in strong.
Yes.
That's for sure.
I bet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Love
no, I would just add to it, you know, that I think a lot of times the will of God gets to be really tricky for people. So it's humans trying to understand God. And so that's a tricky thing to hear from God and to be willing to obey him. But I think, you know, a lot of times it feels like a needle in a haystack. Like there's a will of God in here somewhere and I got to dig around until I can find that tiny little thing that's obscure. And I really have sensed the longer I'm alive that the will of God is for us to grow up and look like him. It's to mature and be a really loving, kind human who represents Christ in the best way possible. And it's less about where exactly that all happens in our life. And so I would just encourage a college student to become who God wants you to be, no matter where you go.
Love it.
So that you set your course, and it does not so much matter if I end up at Baylor, if I end up at UNC, or if I go to UVA, or if I end up, you know, wherever, or not in college at all, and just in equipping. Okay, that's all fine. Are you becoming who God intended for you to be? And is this process growing you into what God has spoken into your life and over your life and equipped your life to become? And if you're in that process, then I think it matters a lot less to God where you are than it is that you're intent on becoming what God intended for your life. So make sure that's the key. And then the rest of it feels not incidental. It is important, but certainly not the most important thing.
Yeah.
So freeing.
Take so much stress off. And then when you get to that school, let's say you are going to school, and then you think, well, should I be in a sorority or a fraternity, or should I join this organization or that organization? Again, it's like, well, it's not really about what thing you join. It's really about who you are in that thing. And, you know, people ask us all the time, you know, does the Lord want me to do this, join this thing, or be a part of that thing? And it's like, I don't know. I think the Lord more wants what Shelley's saying. He wants you to be a light, and he wants you to be like him, and he wants you to grow up and live for him with purpose in your heart. And you can do that in that thing or not in that thing, with that group or not with that group. But you sometimes could find the right school and end up being the wrong person, and being the wrong person at the right school doesn't work.
Yeah.
Woof.
It's great.
That
way
is
to say it.
so
Really good. And that's
so good.
And
So
that's why
helpful.
generations of college students come to listen to what you guys have to say, what you guys are gathering, pointing them to. It's pointing them to seek Jesus first, and then all these other things get it out unto you.
Yeah. Love it.
Do you have any question you wanted to say before I continue on?
Please go.
Okay, well, Jennie and Livy went to Grove Conference Shelley, and one of the things they came home talking about among many things, was in an interview together, you two both sort of said, hey, look, we never, Shelley specifically never was ever open to the idea of starting a church. And then when you did change your mind, which I was laughing so hard at the story, you did, but on one condition, I'm never doing women's ministry. And
It's
so
just wild to think
Jennie
about.
now has come back from your first women's ministry conference. So here's the question. How do you change your mind?
Well, never say never is the right thing to say, because you say never, it's pretty clear you'll be doing it at some point. I think, I had a healthy fear of women's ministry, and not because all of it's bad, not because it's not authentic, not because it's not real for so many people. It just felt like me in the midst of that ill-fitting in so many ways. It felt like maybe I wasn't the right person to be at the helm of anything like that. And I think so many times, there's so much weight that comes with being married to a pastor. And I receive that because it's necessary at times, and I rebuff it at other times because it's like, who decided that if you are married to a pastor that you have to lead a women's ministry? Like, who was that? And how do I talk to them specifically about it? Because it's really agitating that it's just all rolled into, this is what we understand to be true, and this is the way it's all going to work. And I just don't believe in that. I believe in God leading people specifically to certain things, certain times, certain places, and certain people. And I want to be obedient to the Lord, period. That is my highest priority, is to hear him, try to hear him accurately, what he's saying over my life, and then to obey it, whatever it is. So I've never hesitated on that, except for the moments where it feels like, this is too predictable. And I think women's ministry for me, after I was reluctant with the church start, but we've made it through that, and now we have a church, then I'm just like, this is absolutely not going to happen. Then I'm going to be leading a women's ministry. But sure enough, God has a really good sense of humor. And 10 years ago, we started a thing called The Grove, and we just have met regularly through 10 years, never really trying to export what God was doing in our house, but just trying to build the women of our house to a place that they believed that they could contribute. They had a place to serve and to contribute to the house of God, and that they saw themselves as a vital part of this community. And I think God's done that in time to the degree that he felt like now is a good time for us to export that to a greater group of people, thus the first Grove Conference. And we were all pretty amazed at what God did. And I don't throw around holy, just flippantly. We had some really, truly holy moments where God just met us with such intentionality and such clarity that we'll never be the same. And so obeying God's my highest priority. So that's how we got here. So I guess he's going to be faithful now that we are here. And sure enough, he is.
Yes. I think that fact right there, that you want to glorify God, obey him, whatever that looks like, it showed so clearly and so beautifully getting to be a part of it. And I think that, like you said, your whole goal, your whole heart was to build up the women in your church. You've done that so beautifully, Shelley and Louie. And I think that it just was on display for all to see at the Grove Conference, and getting to see women leading in worship, getting to see women leading in greeting, and even just the excellence in the beauty of the oval, which is your space that women walk in and see like, oh my gosh, this is beautifully done. I feel God's love at the gate as I'm waiting in line to get into this thing. And I think it's just so beautiful to see what God has done through your willing heart to do whatever he's called you to do. And I got little glimpses of like, we don't really know what this is going to be, but we're just going to see what God's going to do. Like with interview with Jackie Hill Perry and her mentor, and getting to see Brooke Lidgertward preach, like these things that maybe you didn't really know, but you're just like, hey, God, you said you're leading in this way, so we're going to go for it. And like you said, around each corner, around each turn, there was a holy moment that was truly life-changing for me. Getting to sit there with my daughter, Olivia, and experience it with her, honestly, was life-changing for both of us. And just how you're so generous with sharing and giving. And I'm better because of how you both lead. But Shelley, how you lead me from across the country, you don't even probably know all the ways that you lead me, but you're doing it in a way that is freeing for pastors' wives across the world, because you're not creating a box. You're just saying, like you said with college students, do what God's called you to do to become who He's called you to be. And I think that is life-changing. So thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And I love having you and Olivia sitting in this space. And it helps filter. My favorite thing is doing it with people I love. So obviously I'm a collector of people, and I love people, and I want to walk with people all of my life. And it's just a moment for us to do something together. And so it doesn't ever feel about a certain person. We didn't even announce speakers or any of that. We just sold the conference on, hey, if you want to come meet with God, then come.
I love it.
And so no one even knew really what they were coming to, which is my favorite thing. I'm like, you're coming to something that is trustworthy, that's not going to lead you down rabbit trails of dumb stuff, but we're not going to just give everything away up front either and tell you everything that's going to happen. And so that you can decide, do I like Brooke enough to come and hear Brooke? Do I like Jackie Hill? I just come and God will meet you. And I think that was part of the amazingness of what we experienced, is that nobody was just waiting for the next person who they were really excited about to show up. They were content just to be in the room where God was present, and to know that His presence was going to change us forever.
There's that quote from Gladiator. There was a dream that was Rome once, and it was so fragile, anything above a whisper, and it would destroy it. It's like almost like the mystique. And really, Passion conferences, that was kind of the beginning. For a long time, you never did announce lineups, right?
We did in some places, but then like things like One Day and things that we really felt like were unique, we would just say, come. If meeting with God is a priority to you, and if you feel like He's doing something in this generation, then you don't want to miss it. And so I do think we've had those moments, and the Grove Conference was just another extension of that, just to say, cool. I believe for women that we're so caught up in, do we prefer this or that? Do we like them or them? Do we like the way they talk or they talk? We just have so many preferences that have determined what we live like.
So true.
And I think sometimes God just wants to break down our preferences and say, hey, it's about me, my voice, and the clarity of my word in your life. And it doesn't matter if it's an ass speaking, as he did in the Bible.
Yes.
You are going to get something from me, and that's the most important thing that you need, not who the spokesperson is. And so I think in this way, it just helped people not have those walls.
Yeah.
Amen.
I was curious, is it possible, Shelley, that you weren't rejecting the idea of leading a church, but a preconceived notion of what that had to look like, or a women's ministry conference, but again, the box that's been put into? Because a trademark from my perspective of you guys' ministry and leadership and everything you've put your hand to is you guys just think different. You guys have a very unique way of looking at what a building should look like, what a space should look like. We're not going to use the word lobby. It's an oval. And that just is a hallmark to who you two are.
Yeah.
In a spiritual sense, there's a Steve Jobs-ishness where it's just, there literally is we're going to think different. God's going to do something new. And so do you think that there was just, when you realized there was freedom and permission, that kind of more opened your eyes? We don't have to do it the way it's been done.
Yeah. And I think if we're listening to God, He is going to write unique paths for us. If we're looking at each other and just replicating what we see, then we're going to end up doing the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
I don't think God scripted the same thing for every person on planet Earth. I think He scripted all unique trails for every single one of us. But our cop-out is just to look around and go, well, what is this women's conference doing? Well, let's try to do it a little bit better than them. And then we're all doing the same thing. And so I think sometimes it's scary to think instead I should stop and ask God what He would like to do, and then try my best with my limited ability as a human to understand and to follow, to do what I see God doing and to say what I hear God saying. But if we take that path, it's going to take us on some unique trails. And for us, it's taken us down roads we never anticipated or expected. I didn't wake up one day and think, oh, we should do college ministry the rest of our life. That's going to be awesome. It was more just we're following the leadership and the voice of the Lord, and he's leading us down this path that is unique to us because that's the way he leads, So I think for me, probably getting off the expected and just being freed from what's put on us to really what God is saying about us and for us allowed me to see the uniqueness of what he had gifted me to do. And I love that.
I don't know what the stereotypical pastor's wife looks like, if there is such a thing, especially now, Levi, we're in like such a different zone of church than we were when we met in 1983.
Yeah.
Church was in a different place in 1983, and there weren't a lot of churches like Passion City Church or Fresh Life Church. And I mean, there was no church called Fresh Life Church in 1983. It was the something Methodist Church, the something Assemblies of God Church, the something Presbyterian Church, the something Baptist Church, the Bible Church. So we're in a new era, but coming out of that old era, there were a lot of stereotypes of what the pastor's wife looked like, how she dressed, how she acted. She played maybe the piano offertory at a certain church, and she led the women's ministry, which was called the whatever. And I think Shelley has been a good rebel all of her life. She's a very much of a rule keeper. So she's not that kind of rebel. She's just like I'm going to blaze my own trail. And so I think that was part of it. But the other side of it, Levi and Jennie, was the margin factor. And when we had our last kind of dust up about it's time to plant the church, and she's like, no, it's not. And it was kind of like okay, we're not getting anywhere here. And in that conversation, she said something to the effect of, I have things to do. And people don't know all of what Shelley does, but one of the things she does besides the Grove is she runs a record label.
Yeah. No big
and
deal.
She has,
just
for a long time. She managed Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman for a season, and
Crowder.
Passion and Crowder, and she's raised all this stuff up for decades now. And we had artists signed to contracts. We had records to be made, and these things are project out into time. It's not just something we're doing today. We're doing this for the next 8 years or the next 6 years or whatever. And she just looked at me, and it was more the margin, because she's like, you're going to start this church, but I'm going to finish it. And I don't have time to finish your church. And so, no, we're not doing that. And I couldn't argue with her. I couldn't say, no, babe, I'm going to finish it. Trust me, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to get us to the end of every single thing that we commit to doing. I knew I was going to be flighty, and that I was going to be off to a different vision, and I was going to be thinking just about something else. And
off to the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. And so Shelley, the Lord finally dramatically sort of brought us onto the same page. Praise God. Because I wasn't going to plant a church without her. I mean, that would be the dumbest thing I could ever do. And man, the Lord just so powerfully put us on the same page. And then we've gotten to see the beauty of the good rebel, who's like, okay, if I'm going to do this thing for the women of our house and the women of our city, it's going to be fabulous and a little different. And, a lot of times, I know that's not the question, but the thing about the Grove that is just consistent is the Grove will take your heart out, squeeze it, and then put it back in. And in the process of that, you can't breathe. And there was a moment like that at the conference this year where one of the ladies in our house story was shared. And man, I couldn't breathe through half of it. And they just have a way of pulling the reality of the heart of life into view, and then allowing you to see how the goodness of God never gets negated because of the difficulty of life. Yeah. The goodness of God actually still rises up to the surface, even in the darkest of times. And every Grove is gorgeous. I mean, stunning. Stunning, crazy stunning. And every Grove is heart-stopping. Every single one I've ever been to, I leave and I say, that was the most powerful moment I've ever experienced in my life, period. And so it's been a beautiful journey, and I really pray that they keep going. 10 more years, babe.
Louie, that speaks to your leadership as well. The fact that I think even like maybe in the past it's been, oh, women's ministries like this, they're off doing their own thing, and kind of like not a less than, but maybe a little bit like this is a second tier thing that God's doing. But the fact that you're sitting front row receiving all that God has for you to receive from the Grove, like that's just beautiful. And I think that's just such an example of you also just being in awe of what God's doing, the new thing that he's doing, the beautiful thing that he's doing through your wife, but also through the stunning group of women that he's raising up in your church. Like I don't think that's normal, but it's beautiful.
He's a huge champion of it all.
Yeah.
And I think anytime that you're praying that God would meet the people of your house and that he would encourage and grow them in hope and in endurance, and then you're watching it happen. And I think any pastor who's prayed for it wants to be present for it. I think so many times if you aren't praying that and don't really have a hope that would be a transaction that is able to happen in the view of your house, then maybe it's not as important that you're present when it happens. But for us, we've prayed that God would meet these people profoundly. And if he wants to use our lives in any way to help that process happen, we're available, God. So then if that's your prayer, and then God starts answering and moving, then you want to be where that is happening. And so I can't imagine Louie being anywhere else but right here, cheering and championing on what he's asked God to do. Oof. And it's an amazing thing to live under that kind of leadership.
Oh,
Listen, really Shelley has sat through
this is also true.
5,000 of my sermons.
I mean, that 5,000 is not enough. It's been more.
I mean, I'm not exaggerating.
Yes.
I mean, 5,000 more, maybe 10,000.
I would guess more.
So
wow.
I can certainly get to the Grove and be visible, because I think that's important for the ladies of our house. Honoring, because I think that's important. A champion. And it's easy to celebrate. It's not like hard work to go to the Grove, because it's the best thing going. And it's easy to celebrate because God is just all in it. And Shelley has led the team so well, and the team is just extraordinary. I could go on, but you know, it's funny, Jennie, because not only is it not viewed as secondary, it's kind of like the gold standard around here. And it's like, oh, okay, we got the Grove Conference now.
Right.
So no pressure on me to do the Speak Conference coming up next week. Wow, now all I have to do is create a wonderland in the Oval. All right.
Okay, so good.
I love it.
Well, I did want to ask, you know, in addition to the church, Passion City, the conferences, which it's back to the Benz this year, right? 2024, it's back to the Mercedes. Is that?
That's it.
I mean, I just want to let that sit there because that's a big deal. You guys are climbing a mountain again. I mean, that is not some easy thing like, oh, it's just going to happen. It's if you build it, they will come. You guys are giving your lives and going to fight for a gathering of college students in one of the biggest rooms in this country.
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal. So, I mean, that's amazing. So everybody who knows a college age young person, or if not, if you're praying, be praying for it, because this is going to be coming up at the end of this year. But and when you're not doing all those things and hanging out with London, you guys have chosen, I think it's so cool. You guys chose a long time ago to fall in love with one city in the country, in the world. And that's London, England. And you've just kind of picked over the years to pick off little pieces of it and in tiny bite-sized morsels have tried to really get your arms around one city, which is such a fun strategy. So here's my question. All that is a preamble. What do most people who are gonna go to London on a visit for a couple days or a week or whatever, what are they gonna miss that is something not to be slept on when in London?
Nice.
Wow.
What a great question.
I know.
Man.
Let's see. I would probably put on the top of my list the Sky Garden, which is a open air garden of restaurants and I guess kind of just sitting areas, located at the top of one of the buildings. It's the building that looks like the walkie-talkie. You can't miss it in London. There's only one building that looks like a walkie-talkie, but there is one. And at the top of that building, there is a thing called the Sky Garden, and you have to buy a ticket or somehow get on the elevator by paying something. But it's so worth just seeing that perspective of the city, but also just hanging out in a space that's that high up, that isn't enclosed so that you can't breathe the air, but you're kind of in open air situation. And it's just really a special treat. So I would say that's one of the things I love. What do you love? The food.
Yeah, as far as secret London, my mind just kind of not working right now. So I'll come back to you on that answer in a second. But I think for Shelley and me, we just try to keep, finding a new layer. So a couple summers ago, we were there and we got out on the Thames, and you can go on one of those, 200 passenger kind of tourist boats up and down the river. But we rented just a small little kind of Amalfi Coast, size little boat that a guy drives. We weren't driving it, and he drove us from, one end of London all the way up to the O2
incredible.
Arena to Greenwich, and then all the way back down. And the tide came in while we were coming back. And I mean, the tide literally, it's several feet of water coming in from the ocean, and the whole thing in this little boat. But we saw, London from a whole different vantage point. We started by saving our money up, and we would go, and at night when it got dark, we would just go to have the taxi guy stop. Then he'd say, "Where do you want to go?" And we go, "I don't know. We have $75. How far can we go with $75?
What can we see?
Just drive us
Love
and show us
that.
stuff." And he, nice guy, would just drive us around town and show us things that he wanted people to see and understand. And it's kind of that, it's a rule of thumb of life. And I know there's economics of time and money involved, so I get that. But London has one of the best undergrounds in the world. And it's amazing. We learned and memorized the entire underground system at some point, and we could go anywhere almost without even thinking. Wow. But you're underground. And at some point I was like, I'm never going on the underground again. I'm going above ground because I came here to see London, not to be under London. And so I'm going to save a little extra this year so that when we get here, I can afford to take a taxi and not have to go, "Oh, it's cheaper if you go underground." I'm like, I know, but you went underground. I went above the ground and I saw these 5 things
And
today.
those London cabbies, the black cabbies, are kind of legendary, right?
They know so much. They literally are just happy to share with you what they've learned. And they really are experts. And
they've memorized every
every
road,
nuance of every city.
lane, every muse,
Yes.
every nook and cranny. They passed this test. It is a big, big deal. And I mean, it's a giant, enormous, complicated city. You can get in and give them any address in the city of London. They don't pull it up on their GPS like you would in America. They just drive to it.
Wow.
It's an amazing
unreal.
thing. And they'll teach you anything they know along the way too. So
Love
it's
that.
fun.
Okay, you can.
Wait,
you
you asked me out in London.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
True.
We
Where?
were leading a
Kensington.
a mission trip with the youth group in Albuquerque, and I was an intern, and my internship ended while we were in
At midnight,
London.
the internship was over, so she was fair game. So at 11:59, I was
See,
watching
y'all
the
have a
clock.
story like ours.
It was
Yeah.
raining, and at midnight, I asked her out. Yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
that's amazing. See how
so-
special London is?
I
See,
know.
people
London,
should
London
appreciate it.
Okay, so
Sorry.
here's another question. You guys are fabulous travelers.
Mhm.
What do you think that your average person who gets on a plane a couple times a year, not a ton, but they're traveling some, what's 1 or 2 things that the average person can do that would just make traveling better for them that most people get wrong about getting on an airplane and traveling across the country?
Wow.
This is definitely a question for you.
Pack a lot less.
I'm still getting it wrong.
Be the
Same,
most,
same.
but most revolutionary concept of travel is just pack less. They have places in most towns where you can buy something if you absolutely didn't have something that you needed. Like, oh my goodness, I don't have a sweater. Okay, well, great. There's a H&M right there. You can get
True.
one for $39.99. I think packing less, moving light. And Shelley and I, everybody has a different rhythm, Levi, and we're not that great of travelers necessarily. I just like our style, and our style is to see different things. Shelley just finally went to Dubai, so now she's kind of got, okay, I see what that looks like. But mostly Shelley and I like to go back to places with consistency and regularity. because it's like anything else in life. You look at it, you think you know it, and then the next time you look at it, you go, oh, I didn't really know it. And then at the 10th time, you're like, I didn't really know it at all. And I think that's the beauty for us of just continually going, not, hey, how many places can we go in our lifetime, but how many times can we go to the same place in our lifetime? Because there are some cities in the world that are worth going to a lot of times. And London obviously is one of them, but it's not the only one.
That's right.
Great wisdom.
Yeah,
That's
I like
some
the
good advice.
consistency of exploring on some of your trips. I like figuring out how to take ground and go explore sometimes, but then in other times go take space that's already familiar so that you don't have to worry about where you're going to stay and how it's going to feel and all the hurdles that we have to get over when we travel. So I already know what this feels like. I already know where this place is to stay. I already know what we like to eat. So now I can figure out the next layer down of this place. And I think there's a rhythm in taking ground sometimes and going and finding new things and also appreciating the things that you already know in other times. So we like that kind of wave.
Love that
Very
way of
good
living.
advice. Okay, shifting gears from London, the city, to London, the doodle. What, if any, is there a book? Is there a philosophy? Is there a website that helped you guys in your training of London, your dog? Because I feel like there's got to be something. There's got to be like, did we find a seminar to go to? You guys are incredible dog people.
Oh, and she's an incredible dog.
This is true.
Yeah, we just really got blessed. I mean, honestly, we didn't do anything right. I think we are calm people, so therefore we have a calm dog. I do think environments definitely affect dogs. So if they're living with 3 small toddlers in a house, they're going to be pretty active and pretty excited. Because how would you not with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old yelling at the top of their
Yanking
lungs
the
all the
tail,
time?
right? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
so that's going to be natural. But I think for
Poor
us, we're pretty
Tabasco.
chill people. And so our dog is pretty chill. We did send her to training. People ask a lot about that because they're around her. And then they're like, what in the world? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, we did send her to a training. She went away for a month or 3
Like
weeks.
boarding
and-
school? Is this like?
yeah, we didn't get to see her and they taught her all the things that are important. And really the one thing that taught her or taught us, really, I think you send your dog to training so that you can learn. Your dog is fine, but your people probably need some training. So
True.
we needed training. And what
Wow.
the training we needed to know by sending London to training is that we need to have an upper hand with her so that no matter what the circumstances, if she's with dogs or if she's with people or if she's with whatever, that we can control the dog. And if you can get in that upper hand with them and get in a place where you can have them sit no matter what or calm down no matter what's going on around them, then you're pretty good. And that's sort of what we sent her to training for so that we could learn, I guess, how to do that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It does make
London
sense.
girl, we're
so
talking
good.
about you right
She's
now.
right behind us.
Oh,
She's right there.
London. We love
This
you.
is what the
Give-
people are here for. You guys, this is, and you know,
Sound
what,
asleep, dead to the world.
everything
Yeah.
you just said applies to parenting, applies to leading team. If you're not calm, the situation's not going to be calm. So
It's true.
the problem is yourself.
Yes,
Oh.
it is. I remember there was a show that a guy named Cesar Millan had about training dogs a long time ago that used to be on TV. And the thing he would say all the time was, you know, you send your dog to training, but you're really training the owner. Because the dog is going to pretty much do what the owner wants it to do. The dog wants to please you. It's just that you're so confused that oftentimes the dog doesn't know how. So I'm like, hello, I think I could use some
This is
training.
profound. Yeah. Well, Louie and Shelley, we got to send you on your way, hopefully with the promise that you will not wait 72 episodes to come back because I didn't get through a tenth of the wisdom I wanted to mine from you, like a gold mining operation here. You guys just have so much wisdom every time you open your mouths.
Yeah.
But I know we love you.
We love you.
I know that there's a long list of people that want to say thank you to. So on behalf of all those, thank you. Passion2024.com, I'm sure, is where people can get more information. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. Passion2024.com, passionconferences.com, and at amazon.com, you can find this amazing book for couples, The Marriage Devotional.
Wow.
Strongly
You
recommend
are
it.
incorrigible.
And I'm thinking
Strongly.
that everyone who's listening today already has been through this, but maybe there's a new
If
person who
not-
just came along to the podcast recently. And so look for this.
Absolutely.
Obviously, wherever books are sold.
Oh
Fantastic
my gosh.
cover, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely got inspired by that. You'll see it in my next book that comes out. Some props to you.
Inspiration.
And credit where credit is due.
That's
You're
awesome.
guys,
We
you
love
guys
you
are
guys.
outrageous. Love you. Thank
Love you,
you.
Luskos.
And the kids, as we're listening to this Indescribable activity book for kids, releasing the day that we're recording this. By June, it'll have been out for a minute, but get that for your kiddos. And Louie, Shelley, thank you for being our friends.
Yeah, appreciate
Love you
it.
guys.
Love you.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to swing by levilusko.com and jennielusko.com to see what's going on in our world.
And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And in the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media.
Jennie and Levi Lusko, out.